How is social media influencing the CPA pipeline? This is the IssuesWatch podcast. Hi, I'm Don Meyer, Chief Marketing Officer at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to the IssuesWatch podcast. The profession and this podcast have devoted countless hours to discussing the accounting profession's pipeline challenges. We've discussed the 150-hour requirement, how students perceive the profession, even work-life balance and starting salaries. Today, we want to talk about what one organization, and one you might not expect, is doing to tackle some of those issues. Here with me to discuss a nationwide effort to expand the talent pool and actively invite more diverse young people to consider accounting is Liz Barentzen, Vice President, Operations and Talent Initiatives with the Center for Audit Quality. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so let's start with the basics. Explain for our listeners and our viewers the overall role of the Center for Audit Quality, or the CAQ, and how it got involved in a nationwide campaign to attract a new generation of students into the talent pipeline.
So our board is made up of the CEOs of the Big Four, as well as the CEOs from Grant Thornton, BDO, RSM, and Crow. And we also have 3 public board members and Barry Melanson from AICPA. Since I started at the CAQ, a regular point of discussion amongst the board was the lack of diversity within the profession. It's an issue that has been going on for many years, that hasn't been solved, and there has to be a solution where we can work together. And ultimately, where we landed was at attracting, creating awareness with students at the high school level made sense to do collectively, because high school students who might not even have an awareness about what accounting is, or they may have, we see from our research, that misconceptions about it being boring and that it requires really heavy math skills. We could do that more effectively by pulling our resources together. And the fact that the CAQ is so centrally situated, where we have that direct access with these firms that could help fund it, which again, it's not an inexpensive endeavor. That's how this started.
All right, that's great. And you mentioned one thing that I think is particularly important for our listeners and viewers to know is it seems like a lot of our members, a lot of CPAs started paying attention to the pipeline issue earlier this year, late 2023, after a couple of Wall Street Journal articles came out about the pipeline issue. But you mentioned that you've been looking at the issue, the CAQ and the larger firms have been looking at this issue for a couple of years. In fact, I first saw you speak for the first time about what became Accounting Plus at an event 2 years ago in New Orleans. So this has been, in development for a really long time. This isn't all of a sudden that just sort of got dropped on everybody's desk and, we tried to figure out how to solve it. This has really been in the works for a couple of years now. So tell us more about Accounting Plus and that target audience that you alluded to earlier.
Those discussions have been happening, like I said, since I started with the CAQ almost 6 years ago. We were working on this even before COVID, and it evolved into this initiative. And so really what we're trying to do is reach Black and Latino and Hispanic students at their early college and high school levels and bring awareness to them about accounting and what a great career it can be, and all of the great attributes of the career, showing at the same time that it can be an interesting career and that it doesn't require the complicated math skills that we know students think that it does. And so we did a lot of research before we launched this campaign. That's part of the whole process. Is we did almost a year long of market research where we had many focus groups, and we did a very big survey where we were able to ask our students directly, what do they care about in a career? How do they prioritize? What are the things that they prioritize about a specific career or major? Where are they getting their information about different careers? Who influences them? Who do they pay attention to when they're talking about careers. And that data was formed the basis of the campaign. And we do this every year to make sure that we're current in our messaging. But as I've said, those two big messages that came out loud and clear, not only in our first tranche of research, but years after, that accounting is boring, it's uninteresting, and that it requires these complicated math skills. And so if we think about the audiences that we're trying to reach, Black and Latino and Hispanic students, which we also know from our research, they don't have currently connection to the profession in the same way at scale that white students do, because this profession has traditionally been, majority white and actually male dominated too. That's changed over the many years, but I think we saw it as our job to bring this information to students in a way that was compelling to them, talking about accounting in different ways that they might not have heard before. Because quite honestly, if we think about what you do hear about accounting, it probably matches those misperceptions. You see these portrayals of accountants in movies and commercials and TV shows, and it's not flattering. So we're trying to change that. And how we're doing that is directly reaching students. So we are out there on social media channels where we know students are. So like on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube channels, through paid advertising, we reach these students with these messages about accounting and basically invite them or tempt them to come back to our Joint Accounting Plus website that we've populated with a lot of different resources, including scholarships and internships and different career quizzes and information that will help guide them and keep them engaged, we believe, and we're seeing those results. And we also reach students directly in the classroom. So we've designed with the EverFi, which is a national digital education provider, we designed a career awareness curriculum. We're not teaching accounting skills. What we're teaching students is about the availability of accounting as a viable career, all the different places a career in accounting can take you, as well as why accounting skills are necessary, not only if you want to be an accountant, but in your personal life as well. And so that course is through EverFi. We've been able to deploy that course in over 3,300 classrooms across the country. Actually, more classrooms than 3,300 schools across the country. Many of those schools have multiple classrooms. And we've had over 110,000 students view that content. So that's another way that we're reaching students at scale directly.
And a couple of things that I wanted to mention. You've mentioned a couple of times that this campaign is not inexpensive. And, I have heard, you talk about the investment in it. I'm not going to say it now because that number might have changed. But I do want to make sure that everybody watching and listening to this understands that this is a large scale campaign. I mean, there's a lot being put into this. And one of the things that I particularly like that the CAQ has been very active in supplying to state societies like us is you have a lot of data.
Yeah.
And you have provided a lot of that data to state societies. And, as we as an organization, tried to address this pipeline issue and be another piece of the puzzle, like the Accounting Plus campaign is, I kept pointing out to everyone that, we don't need to do the research as to why someone may not be sitting for the CPA exam, or we don't need to try and uncover what the obstacles or the barriers to entries are. It's right there. I mean, you guys had it all. So I think if you like data, I think you guys have been able to provide an awful lot of it. Just to go back to the target audience for a moment, much of the target audience, and this is something, quite frankly, we've struggled with a little bit. Much of the target audience is years away from graduating from college and becoming CPAs. We've struggled with what metrics do we use to measure success in the short term. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. What metrics do you use for the campaign to try and measure success and find out whether or not you need to pivot or move some of your messaging?
Yeah, so that it's really important that we're measuring success along the way, given the level of investment, especially. So what we're looking at really, it's the kind of those, and I'm not a marketing person by background, nor, and I just want to clarify with this campaign, we have a creative firm, Culture One World. They do great work. They have the expertise in reaching these student audiences. I wouldn't even know where to begin to come up with kind of some of the content, but that's what their business is, and they do it. And so some of those social media metrics that we look at are like, visits to our site and time on our site. And actually a really important one is it's not only just, how many ads get opened that we're sending out there. It's then those students that actually come back to the Joint Accounting Plus website and choose to subscribe. So that number of subscribers is a really important number for us, because that shows us what that level of interest is and how we can keep reaching and building off of that number of subscribers. We also we can measure year over year if our messaging is resonating, right? So we have seen a lift when we do a broad survey of students, their thoughts about accounting. We are starting to see increases or in positive sentiment about accounting. Ultimately, we want more accounting graduates, right? And that is a longer term proposal, because we just launched this 2 years ago. And if you were a freshman in high school 2 years ago, you're still in high school, you're a long way from declaring accounting as a major. So some of those shorter term measurements about the campaign are really critical. And just to also highlight, part of the campaign is some other media partnerships. So we did a partnership with the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is very cool. And there's a lot of value in that. What we did is we brought students to the offices of the back office, financial office of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got to go on to the field. They got to see a game. We kept keeping those students engaged. But the real value of that partnership is the content that we get, right? That we can then share more broadly. And so we did a great interview with Omar Khan, who's the COO of the Steelers organization, with an accounting background and a real belief in this profession. And so we're looking, to do more partnerships like that. We have some exciting things coming in the future too.
Right. And I did want to touch on, that concept of not recreating the wheel and taking what you've already created and kind of maximizing that. I think it was the Indiana Society of CPAs. They were one of the first state societies to take your materials, kind of make them their own. And then we kind of took Indiana's and we made them our own. So we've been able to utilize your materials in that way. But we also were able to tap into some elements of your research. One of the things that you would look into, or who are the influencers for someone when it comes to whether or not they pursue a career in accounting. You alluded to it earlier. And of course, a very big one is parents. Yes. So as we try and do our part at a local level here in New Jersey, one of the audiences that we actually want to target are the parents. Yep. of high school students. So, we've been going into high schools and speaking to high school students for 20 years or so. But we want to make a more proactive effort to go where the parents are. And so that might be, following your lead, going onto social media platforms and trying to figure out where those parents are so that we can get the message to them as well. And I think that's
another campaign, right? You're talking about another audience. And so then I think, the process, part of that would be really understanding what messages resonate with parents about accounting. I can imagine some of them would be stable career, right. Good long-term earning potential, all those things. But
and AI is not going to kill it.
Yeah, right. For sure.
Yeah. One of the first things I did when AI started to become just omnipresent, you were hearing about it everywhere. I just, out of curiosity, I Googled the phrase, will artificial intelligence, or what careers will artificial intelligence kill? Mm-hmm. And whether they're accurate or not, if a parent does that and accounting is on that list,
right,
that does permanent damage, or at least temporary damage to the profession. So I think it's important that we reach that audience. I did want to talk about the campaign and the social media platforms. and the other platforms that you're using. So much of the campaign is focused on Instagram and TikTok, but you've also partnered with state societies like ours to organize events at diverse high schools. In fact, we're helping the CAQ and EverFi with an event in Newark on May 31st. So maybe talk a little bit about why you think it's important to have those grassroots connections in addition to the wide scale effort that's on Instagram and TikTok and other platforms.
Yeah. Well, it all builds off of each other, right? Like this is kind of a building block of the campaign. So that direct access and what we'll be doing, I'm really, really excited for the New Jersey event in Newark. We will be at a high school in Newark, and while we're there, we will be we'll have several CPA professionals speak to the high school students about their own experiences in accounting. And this will be my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 engagement that I've done with EverFi.
That's great.
And I can be prepared to be wowed, is what I would say. These events are fantastic because essentially what we're doing at a very local level is so all the students who are in the audience that are listening to these career professionals speak to them, they've already taken the EverFi course. So they've already been primed about what accounting is, what it isn't, what are some of the career possibilities. And then they get to see in real life these professionals tell their own stories, which ultimately, this whole campaign is a storytelling campaign. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring connection to students, connections that they might not have had otherwise, and showing them people that look like them, that resonate with them, that they can do this too. Inspiring stories, right? And so we do that in the high school, and how it builds off itself is that we'll be capturing a lot of content, social media content, that we can then use and redistribute through our social channels. So it's kind of like a gift that keeps on giving, but it's also those events in real time are just awesome.
Yeah, and we had no trouble identifying 3 member speakers to speak at the event. They were incredibly enthusiastic about doing it. I think they are looking forward to the opportunity. And I think what you said, you hit the nail on the head with, we need CPAs to tell their story. Not talk about products and services or service lines and deadlines and things like that, but tell your story. What not only interested you about accounting to get you into it, but what continues to motivate you, what gets you up and out of bed every single morning, and how do you help people and how do you help businesses? And we say that all the time to our members. I think every time we talk about the pipeline, somehow it ends up us telling CPAs that, you got to tell your story, tell your story. In fact, the theme of our convention in June is what's your story?
Oh, great.
So we're trying to push that narrative a little bit. So just in closing, anyone who's listening to this, those currently in the profession, from CPAs to firms and companies, is there any way that they can participate in the Accounting Plus program?
If you have Instagram, I think Instagram is a lot of people have Instagram. I would just join and follow some of the content that is on there, and you'll see it. And if there's something that reaches you or that you find interesting, send it to the students in your life. We have to shift that narrative. And I think if you can kind of get on some of these social channels and see what that content looks like, it's going to help frame your story for when you're talking to students. I would also encourage everybody to go to our CAQ website, www.caq.org. And our research is all on that website. So if you do have high school students in your life, or you do have access to high school students right now, understanding what that research is and reading those reports could be really helpful, I think, as to thinking about your own initiatives and how you can effectively message high school students. But I agree with you, like, tell your story, get out there, reach students.
Right. So definitely find the Accounting Plus campaign on Instagram and TikTok. But also, if you, as Liz said, if you have a good personal story or you know of a good story, share it with your state CPA society, share it with
Yes.
us, because we can use it, but we can also share it with the CAQ and Liz. You know, they have, just like we do, they have media opportunities. We actually were able to place a couple of our members in a couple of the media opportunities that CAQ had, some great profiles of members. And so, you know, that's one way that you can participate, is just keep sharing that story, but make sure we know about it.
Yeah, for sure.
We shouldn't be, if there's a good story, we shouldn't be surprised by it. You know, we
That's
should know
right.
about it as it's happening. Yeah. So Liz, thanks so much for this information. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks for listening or watching. For additional information about the Accounting Plus campaign, visit joinaccountingplus.com.